Hey there, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series, RecoverED, Recovered Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
Chloe, if you don't mind just introducing yourself to the group, and then I'm just going to let you take it away.
Okay. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Chloe. My sobriety date is July 7th, 1992, and I am super grateful for that. And Stephanie made me sound like a real expert on this, and I am less of an expert and more just I have a lot of character defects, and and I've had to work really hard on 6 and 7, and so I just have a lot of experience with this. So, but I appreciate those kind words, Stephanie. So I got sober young, and I had tried going to other 12-step programs thinking that I had problems that weren't alcohol. I really just didn't want alcohol to be the thing that I had to give up just because it worked. It was something that always changed the way that I feel in a way that made life tolerable. And I ended up getting sober through treatment and, joined AA and have been here ever since. I don't have a long story of relapse, and, I am grateful for that. But I love talking about 6 and 7. They're tricky steps. It took me the first several years, I think, before I really understood these 2 steps, because there's just 2 little paragraphs in the big book about them. And so, my first time through the steps with my sponsor, I've had a lot of different sponsors over the years. I got sober in my first couple of years. I was out in Tucson, Arizona. And so the sponsor I had there, we really just read those paragraphs, got on our knees, said the prayer, and then I was, on to steps 8 and 9. And one of the things I always want to start with in this meeting is I'm just talking about my own experience. And so if your sponsor is telling you to do something different, do what she says. Don't do what I say. This is just my experience. I'm not right, so listen to her, please. But I have had several different experiences with 6 and 7. Again, these are steps that I will do for the duration of my sobriety. I haven't found that I've been struck perfect yet. What we're dealing with is character defects here, and these are part of the human experience. And so I will start here just reading through the step itself, and then we'll read through those 2 paragraphs, and then I'll kind of just go through, some of my experience with these steps. And I do really want questions. Again, there's not a lot of content in the book, so please be thinking of questions for me. So on 59, that's in how it works. That's where it lists the actual steps. So step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And so just, to really paraphrase, we've just done 4 and 5 with our sponsors. We've just seen all of these defects of character. We're getting willing to give them to God in 6, and in 7, we are giving them to God. So then let's turn over to 76, where we've got our 2 little paragraphs on these steps. So at the top of the page, it says, if we can answer, well, let's turn to the page before, because it does start in the middle of a thought. So on the bottom of 79, this is coming out of our 5th step, and 6 and 7 are so closely tied to 4 and 5, and I will talk about that, but just to read through. This is talking about right after our 5th step. So we've just sat down, we've just read our whole 4th step to our sponsor. It's telling me that now I'm returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, which is just where we just were. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, which are the first 5 steps, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. And so Bill, throughout the book, talks about this spiritual structure that we're building. You know, he talks about the foundation stone, the cornerstones, the keystones. He is trying to like paint this picture of this spiritual archway that we're trying to walk through. And that's what we're getting right here. Coming off of our 5th step, we're, you know, ready to walk through into this place of freedom. So we're asking, is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And so in that hour, we're going back through that inventory that we just read. Did I leave anything out? Were there any secrets that I was holding back that I knew that I was supposed to tell her that I should? It's really not for like, oh, I forgot that in 3rd grade, you know, Betty punched me in the face and I'm still kind of pissed about it. I mean, if that comes up, obviously, you know, write it down. But this is more about things that I have intended. These are things that are going to block me from God. So the next page on 76, if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And so that's a prayer there. We're asked if we're still holding on to one of these things, we ask God to help us be willing. And I'll go more into the sort of the formal part of this in a minute. So when ready, so when I'm willing, we say this prayer, something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. So we're giving everything. We don't know, the truth is we don't know what's good and bad. We don't know what are our defects and what are our assets. We're giving it all to God. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So we're asking not so that I can have this great free life, it's so that I can be more helpful. Take away the things that are blocking me from being helpful. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. And one fun thing, and I don't think Bill ever said anything about it, but there's like this story in AA about how in the 3rd step prayer, there's no amen at the end of it. And this is the first amen that we have in the book since that 3rd step prayer. And so there's this sort of, you know, story in AA that we're placed in a position of protection between step 3 and step 7 while we're doing those action steps, while we're writing our inventory. And on step 7, we get that amen there. So like, I don't know that it's actually true, but it's, you know, it's a nice little story. So I just want to talk about, you know, I want us to sort of do big picture for a minute here, because I want to talk a little bit about why these steps are important. You know, I came into AA, or went into treatment thinking that drugs and alcohol were my problem, right? Like, you know, I thought that alcohol was my problem. If I could just either learn how to drink safely, if I could just learn how to not drink, if I could learn how to, you know, drink in moderation, if I could learn how to drink without consequences, then I'd be okay. And in AA and with sponsorship, with going through these steps, what I have learned is that alcohol is not my problem. Lack of power is my problem. I don't have an alcohol problem. I have a problem with powerlessness. I lack power. And that's not just around alcohol. We start with that, but it's around everything. And so the whole thing I'm trying to gain through these 12 steps is access to power. That's it. That's the whole thing. And one of the side effects of accessing that power is that I'm restored to sanity, and I cannot drink anymore. So that's one of the beautiful things. But the other part of this powerlessness is that I've been a real jerk, you know, like I just have, you know, it's like I, you know, have been I've been living by this delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage well. So I come to the table thinking that you're my problem, like that I'll be okay if I just get what I want. If I can just get that job, if I can just get that boyfriend, if I can just, you know, get a car that runs, or, you know, a certain amount of money in the bank, you know, it's like, if I can just get things to look a certain way, then I'll be okay. And I'm convinced of this. And so all of my actions that I take are based on this lie, this delusion that I'll be okay if you'll just act different, if you'll just give me what I want, and you'll be happy too. Trust me. Like I've got it all worked out. It's better for me. It's better for you. It's better for the government. It's better for the neighbor. Like everybody's going to be okay if you'll just follow, my lead on this. And I believe it. And so when you don't do what I think that you're supposed to do, I react as if my life depends on it. I'm delusional. I don't know. I don't know that's what I'm doing. And I don't know that I'm wrong. And so these defects that I have, like I'm a liar at my worst. When I feel like you're standing in the way of me being happy, I will lie, I'll steal, I'll cheat, I will manipulate, sometimes, and I love pages 60 to 63 where it goes through all of that, right? In that third step, we talk about how I am wheeling and dealing. I'm just an actor, but I think I'm a director. I'm trying to arrange everything, the lights, the scenery. If you would just stay put, everybody will be happy, including me. And so that's how I show up in life. And again, I don't know that I'm doing it. And so I've spent my whole life operating with these defects of character that I just think are survival skills. I just think that's what I have to do to get my needs met, because nobody else is going to do it for me. And, getting sober, I started to realize I've been wrong my whole life. Everything I've come to the table with has been wrong. We have these surrenders that we have to go through, or that I've had to go through in those 12 steps. And the first one in step 1 is, it's on 25, where it talks about, we came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as I had been living it. And that's that first step, surrender. Have I come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of my life as I have been living it? I had to believe it. I wasn't going to surrender in step 1 until that's that powerlessness. Do I believe in the hopelessness and futility of my life? If I don't, I'm not going to keep on with these steps. And the reason I'm telling you this is because these surrenders are what are going to push you through the rest of the steps. If you don't believe that your life depends on it, you're not going to do it, because these are hard. And so it always comes back to that desperation of a drowning man. Do I believe I have to do this? If lack of power is my dilemma, how do I access power? This is about aligning my will with God's will, accessing that power so that I can have this connection and keeping that connection. It's about living in the sunlight of the Spirit. And, you'll hear in AA, I heard it, I've said it, I've been part of the problem. It's said all the time that, we have this God-sized hole. We've used everything to fill it up. And I know I understand it. It resonated for me. I could identify that. I would use, guys, I would use money, I would use drugs and alcohol, I would use, adrenaline, I would use all of the food, shopping, whatever, to fill up that feeling of emptiness. And then I heard somebody say, I have just as much God in me right now as I have ever had. God has always been there. There has never been a hole. What it has been is that I've been so full of self that I couldn't access God. And in that moment, I got it. God's always been there. There's just been so much Chloe that I couldn't connect with that power. I could not access power. And so steps 4 through 9 are all about getting rid of so much Chloe that there is that I have the ability to tap into that power, which is the answer to all of my problems. And so, 6 and 7 are a big part of the getting rid of the parts of me that are continuously blocking me over and over again. Even today at, 20 something years sober, I am still run by the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage well. If you would just do what I want, I'll be happy. And so it's coming back to that place over and over again, identifying those defects of character and offering them to God. So that first step, surrender, right? We've got that first step, surrender, came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of my life. We've got the second step, proposition. God's either everything or he's nothing. What's our choice? So if I'm choosing that God's everything, then we're brought into step 3, right? Where where I'm coming to this place of truly believing that my life run on self-will can hardly be a success. That's the third step, surrender. Do I truly believe that my life run on my will can't be a success? If I still think that I can manage things, I'm not going to keep going. So I have to, and trust me, I spent 9 months sober, dry, miserable, trying to self-will my way through sobriety. And sobriety and recovery are two different things. I was sober, I was not recovered. I was miserable, and I made everybody around me miserable. And so I was trying to, I was trying to rely on my own will. What happens is we either drink or we change, or we blow our brains out. I've seen all three happen. Thankfully, I'm grateful that I hit a bottom without having to do the other two things. And I was brought to that place of true surrender, where those first three propositions, all clicked into place. So that third step, surrender, leads us into 4 and 5, where we're writing down all of these things, right? We've got our resentment inventory, where we're looking at all of we think that we're going into, like, it's sort of a trick. We think we're going into it just talking about all the ways that people have wronged us. It's like, that's, like, I was super excited about column 1 and column 2, it's like, yeah, this jerk, and, oh, she was the worst. And, just, getting really down and dirty with it, and then, we've got column 3 and 4, where we start to see things from it, especially column 4, where I'm really turning it around and looking at it from a whole new angle. And I start to see the stage character that I've been playing, right? I start to really understand who I am. And so I spent hours in step 5 reading, and then we've got our fear and our sex inventory. And so you're sitting there for a long time, over and over again, looking, I'm looking at the ways that I show up. I believed that I was just this sweet little, hippie chick that just peace and love, man. It's like, can't we all just get along? That's who I thought that I was. In truth, like, that was my persona. I was, like, stealing from you and then helping you look for it. My money was taken too. Let's look over here. Maybe it's under, I was that jerk. It's like, I'd make out with your boyfriend when you were in the other room. Like, one love, baby. It's like, I thought that I was somebody very different than who I really was. And by the end of my 5th step, and I say this because it's so important. It's been so important for me. By the time I was done reading, it was a bitter pill. Some people walk out of their 5th steps, and it's not wrong. It's just never been my experience. Some people walk out feeling very free, feeling like somebody else finally has their whole story, and they feel really connected to God. It's a spiritual experience. My experience has always been that I've just, like, really swallowed some, hard, ugly chunks of truth about myself, because I am delusional. And by the end of step 5, it's been handed right back to me. Here's the truth about who you are in your life, in the world, and in the lives of the people that you love the most. You are trying to get what you want. You are manipulating. You're stepping on toes. You are lying. You are cheating. Even today, it's like, I can still be delusional. I can still create chaos and confusion for the people closest to me, because I still live by the delusion that I can only be okay if you do what I need you to do for me. So step 5, like, hitting that point of, it's been a real bottom for me every single time, where I really have just faced the truth of what I bring to the relationships in my life. And that's been important, because that's what carries me through 6 and 7. I'm coming into the 6th step with a full understanding of who I am. It's the truth. It's not good or bad. It's just the truth. This is who I am. And so, I, as a sponsor, I am writing as I'm listening to your 5th step. If your sponsor doesn't do that, it's not wrong. Everybody does it differently. I just tend to jot down the defects of character that my sponsees, that I hear as they're reading. And then I give them this list at the end of their 5th step. It's not exhaustive. It's just they're the ones that have popped up for me, and I say, add to this. Go home, spend your hour, and go back through your inventory. Is there anything you missed? and, write down more character defects. Spend the next couple of days adding to this list as you go. But it's important that I do it right after that fifth step, because it is fresh in my mind. I am humbled. I have humility in that moment. And my ego is obliterated. The tricky thing about, alcoholics and probably humans, is that our ego has this regenerating quality. It rebuilds itself, it reconstructs, and before very long, I think that I'm great again. I think that I'm doing better than you. There's this old story that was in the grapevine that I always have loved. And it was like this person wrote in saying, it's like, I've really been praying for humility, which humility, I always think of being right-sized, right? Being teachable. So, I've been praying for humility. It's like, it's a character asset that I really want in my life. And, morning and night asking God to bring me humility, and being humble and being right-sized. And I was sitting in the meeting tonight, looking around and really telling myself how much more humble and how much more humility I had than him and her and her and him. And, it's like, it's just what we do, right? It's like, we think we are doing so great. And even in prayer, I can be, just reconstructing my ego. So again, at the end of step 5, I am pretty much as right-sized as I'm going to get. And so that is where, in truth, with God, I'm writing the rest of these defects of character down that I've just seen. What is the truth about my character? Who am I? Who do I show up as? And that's going to be so important, for the rest of your sobriety, but for sure for 8 and 9, when you're going to, sit down and make amends to the people that you love the most or that you hate the most, it doesn't matter. You probably owe them all amends. I certainly have. So, so I've got this list. I, say the prayer. It's a great prayer, but, sort of like the same with that 3rd step prayer. The words are just symbolic. They really are. And again, I love the words I say the actual prayer, but it's a big, if you say them without meaning them, they're not going to do anything. Like, this is about me offering everything to God and saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Even when I think I'm doing the right thing, I still have selfish and self-seeking motives. God, take it all and, make me who you want me to be. And then, it's like different people have different experiences. I find 6 and 7 to be really painful steps because, I come into step 6 and I always, I think in that place after 5, I have always had total willingness to give everything to God. There's never been something I want to cling to. Later there will be, but in that moment, I'm usually so right-sized that God, take it all. And I'm saying the prayer, all day long. I'm going out about my business, life goes on. But now I'm wide awake to it. Now I see with complete clarity the things that I'm doing. All of the things that I just read to my sponsor, 3 days later, I see myself doing it still. I'm snapping at my kids. I'm flipping people off in traffic. I'm, covering up things at work that I didn't do right because I don't want to look bad. And now it's so objectionable to me. Now, like, I deeply, deeply don't want to be that person, and I can't stop doing it. Again, lack of power is my dilemma. I'm on step 7. I don't yet have access to that power. I'm on my way there, but I still don't really have the power to be any different. Now, just my eyes are wide open to it, and it hurts. Again, like, I've just seen so clearly how my defects are harming the people closest to me. And now I can't lie to myself. Like, there's no delusion anymore. Now I see it with complete, 20/20 vision. And yet I can't stop doing it. Some things God did take quickly. Like, there are some things that were easy. And then there's some things that I'm still offering to God, all of these years later. Like judgment. Stephanie and I were talking about judgment yesterday. Like, that's a hard one for me. It just is. It's like, it's one, and it's objectionable. And I always, like, even today, I have to bring it back. Do I believe that this defective character is going to block me from the power that my life depends on? Do I believe my life depends on offering this defective character to God? Or do I think that I can get away with just being like, yeah, she's a real bitch, you know? Usually I have that delusion that I can get away with these little teeny tiny character defects. It's not the big ones. I'm not cheating, you know, I'm not stealing anymore. So like, surely God doesn't mind if I'm just, you know, like thinking about how boring this guy in the meeting is tonight, you know? But the truth is, it's all like, these are all the things that are blocking access for me. And I really have to treat them with the same way. So I didn't grow up religious. I don't have like really any background at all with that, but the Quaker religion, and I've never been to a Quaker church either, but I've always been super interested in them. And there's this one really great story, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but so the Quaker church was, I don't know if he was the founder or if he was just one of the founders. It was this guy, George Fox. And so I think he was in England or something, I don't know. But then so here in America, there was one of our kind of founding fathers of the United States was this guy, William Penn, and he was the founder of Pennsylvania. And he was trying to be a Quaker. He like had joined the Quaker religion. He was like super into it. And one of the big tenets of being a Quaker is like this, like, is peacefulness. Like, you don't fight, you don't go to war. They're all about like, you know, just like non-resistance and non-violence. But back in, you know, those days, if you were of a certain stature and, you know, sort of importance, part of your uniform was wearing a sword. And William Penn, you know, he was, I guess, like American nobility or whatever they would have been called back then. But, you know, he wore this sword and he knew that it conflicted with the Quaker ideals. And so he wrote this letter to George Fox saying, like, what do I do about this? Like, you know, this is part of my, you know, expected uniform, but I know that it conflicts with the ideals of this religion that I want to be a part of. Like, what am I supposed to do? And what George Fox wrote back was, wear the sword until you can't wear it anymore. And he put down the sword and he stopped wearing it as part of his uniform. And I think like that's how I see steps 6 and 7. You know, there are some things when I was, you know, a year sober, there were things that I did that I can't get away with today. I didn't even know that I was doing them, you know? And so if you're anything like me, I will look at other people and think, why is she doing that? How does she get away with that? How can she be sober and still behave like that when I can't get away with it? The truth is, we all have defects of character and they look different. There's some things that were just really easy for me to put down. You know, I was done with it. I put it, and then there's been other things that I've struggled with, you know, year after year. And when that sword gets too heavy, I will go to God with it, with that desperation of a drowning man saying, this is too heavy, take it. I'm done with it. I can't carry it anymore. And that's, you know, over and over again, that's the offering that I come to. Once it's objectionable, and that's the key to this, they have to be objectionable to me. Step 5 makes them objectionable. But then what happens when I'm not, you know, a day out from doing my 5th step? I have to bring it into prayer and meditation. God, you know, like, this is objectionable to me. I do not want to be the kind of person that shows up in the lives of my family, my coworkers, strangers in traffic, my neighbors, my children, you know, harming them in this way. This is objectionable to me. Please take it. It's too heavy. And, you know, I tend to be a visual thinker. That image has worked for me. You know, I've always really loved that.
Hey, Chloe.
Yes.
I have a question.
Please.
Is it possible for maybe at some point a character defect to be objectionable, and in the process of the ego regenerating itself for a character defect to then not be objectionable anymore? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Absolutely. I mean, and again, I think that's what happens. That's what's happened for me after a 5th step. Everything's objectionable. God, I don't want to be this person anymore. Please take it all. I have this huge surrender, this immense willingness. And then I go back out in life and, you know, I fall back into that idea that, that I need to succeed and I will step on you to get there. I need to be happy and you're not going to get in my way. And so if you get in my way, then I'm going to do whatever it takes, you know? And again, the more recovered we get, the narrower that path gets. And so it may not be that I feel like I can stab you or slice your tires or smash your windshield, but it may, you know, with a little time sober, a little time recovered, it may be that I just manipulate you, you know? And so 6 months ago, manipulation was really, really objectionable to me because I just really saw with full force how harmful that was. But 6 months later, now it's palatable again. You know, it's like, I'm just willing to do a little bit, you know, I'm just, you know, because she doesn't know how much happier we'll both be if she'll just, do this thing that I need her to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I have a question, Stephanie.
Yeah, please.
You just said, so whenever things happen and those, character defects regenerate, or, the thinking regenerates, is it because we're not maintaining fit spiritual condition?
I would say yes. I mean, I would say if we're in 10, 11, and 12, and here we suffer from this human condition at the end of the day. So none of us, maybe you guys are all perfect. I have not been struck perfect yet. God has not removed all of my defects of character. I choose to believe it's because I can better relate to people and therefore be more helpful. But what I believe is that, and Stephanie and I were talking about this a couple of days ago, in step 10, right? Like the 10th step, the amazing promise that we get in step 10 is that we are restored to sanity, right? Like in step 2, we talk about eventually you're going to get to this place, and then it follows it up in step 10. You are if you have done this, then you have, you are now placed in a position of neutrality around alcohol. You can't drink even if you want to. You will react as if from a hot flame. If somebody hands you a glass of, wine, it's going to be as if they're handing you a glass of Drano. You're going to jump back. You can't take it even if you think that you want to. We are brought to a place where we haven't sworn it off. We're not having to white knuckle it. It's done for us. But I also believe that if we are recovered, if we are restored to, if our sanity has been restored, then we can't act like that anymore. If we are truly, if we have cleared away all of those things that are blocking us from God, then I can't lie. I can't cheat on my, partner. I react as if from a hot flame on those behaviors. If, again, so far, there's still plenty of defects that I do still react on, but that path gets narrower and narrower. I can't steal. It's not even something that I have to, white knuckle my way through. I am restored to sanity, because again, this isn't an alcohol problem. This is a lack of power problem. And if I have accessed power, then I'm restored to sanity, in every aspect of my life. And that's where 10 and 11 and 12 are so important. And that's where finishing your amends before, through that, again, we are in a place where we are trying to keep in that sunlight of the spirit. We're trying to keep that channel open. And if I'm not 10-stepping during my day, if I'm not doing my nightly review, if I'm not, doing my prayer and meditation, then all of these defects of character, all of these little tiny resentments, all of these fears, they just start getting back in there. And it's funny, I was talking to somebody just last night about this. Life happens, right? It's just a tricky thing. We have these, Joe and Charlie, and I talk about this a lot just because I love it so much, but Joe and Charlie have this story about, and it's, they're talking about it as far as anger goes, but I think it fits for any character defect. They talk about, if you take an orange and you squeeze it, you get orange juice. If you take a lemon and you squeeze it, you get lemon juice. If you take me and squeeze me, and anger comes out, jealousy comes out, insecurity comes out, you didn't put it there. It was already in me. And so, these defects of character, I may think that I've dealt with it, that it's gone. But then you put me in a new situation and you squeeze me, I get to see if it's there. There was this meditation that I read one morning by C.S. Lewis. I'm sure you can probably find it if you Google it. It's called Rats in the Cellar. And I love it so much. He talks about how, if you have rats in your cellar and you go stomping down the stairs into the cellar and you switch on the lights, you're not going to see any rats. They've heard you coming, they've scattered, they're hiding. But if you tiptoe down and you stand in the dark for a while and you quickly turn on the light and surprise them, you're going to see a floor full of rats. And so it's the same with my defects of character. And I saw this one morning. I was riding horses with my daughter. We were on the side of a road, and this truck went by really fast and like gunned it right when he got to us. And the horses startled a little bit. And my daughter was like maybe 9, and I got scared. And my finger went up and I started shouting profanities after this truck. And my daughter was mortified. I would not act that way if I hadn't been startled, right? If I had a warning, if I could see with some clarity, if I could think it through, I wouldn't have acted that way. But I was surprised. I didn't have a chance to put on my motherly, recovered woman, mellow, spiritual face. Does that mean that I don't have anger? No, it does. It showed the truth of what is inside of me. It surprised me, it squeezed me, and something that was already in there came out before I was able to cover it up. So we get put in these new situations all the time and we get to see the truth. I didn't know that I, still had the ability to do that with my child right in front of me. If you had asked me, I would have said no, I don't. I swear in front of them all the time now, but when they were little, I was very good about my potty mouth, and I didn't think that I would have done that. And yet you put me in a situation where I'm surprised and I get to see, last time I was on here, I think, or probably every time I'm on here, I talk about I went through this divorce 1.5 years ago. Anyway, and so then I went in, I was a single woman. I've been married to this person for, 26 years or something. And I'd been with him since I was 18. And suddenly I'm single and I don't know how to date. I don't know how to date drunk. I don't know how to date sober. I don't know how to date at all. I know how to get drunk and hop in bed with somebody and then call them my boyfriend. I don't know how to do this. And all of these insecurities started coming up that I didn't know that I had. And I started seeing myself in a way that I was completely unaware was still a part of who I was, because I just hadn't been in the situation to be squeezed in that way sober ever, really. And so it gave me a chance to really see with a whole new perspective what defects of character were still alive and well in me. And I just hadn't had the opportunity to, really be brought to a place of seeing them. One of them was this giant fear of rejection. And again, it came out of this place of insecurity. I had no idea how ruled I am by insecurity, by the fear of what you think of me, not matching up, not being good enough, being too old, not being pretty enough, whatever, all of these stories, it all comes from this insecurity. And so do I bring God into that? Or do I spend $1 million on Botox and, maybe some of each. Maybe God can be in Botox too. But what do I do with that? Am I ruled by that, or am I accessing power so that I'm offering these defects to God and trying to be aware of them throughout the day and bringing power into that part of my life? Here's one story that I love to tell, because again, I was a couple of years sober. I thought that I understood 6 and 7. I was sponsoring. This was a pivotal moment for me when I really understood the real nature of these steps. I was sponsoring this girl named Jody. Poor Jody, I talk about her all the time on these steps, because again, it's just for me, it's the 6 and 7 step story. It really is. So her big thing, she was, I think she was just dating him at the time, this guy named Chris, and she was super insecure. That was one of her big character defects. And it would come out when they were driving around town. They'd be driving down the street and Chris would be at the wheel and he'd look out the window And she'd look to see what he's looking at, and she would, invariably find some woman someplace 5 miles down the road and say, you were looking at her, weren't you? You think she's pretty. You like blondes, don't you? Whatever craziness she would go into. And poor Chris would be like, what? No, I was just like looking to, I was just looking out the window. I didn't even see her. And Jody would just lose her ever-loving mind and create this giant fight, and they'd be yelling at each other, and, she'd be crying. It would be awful. And, she'd call me and we'd talk it through. But, again, the needed power wasn't there. She could not be any different. And so she did, 4 and 5 and, in 6 and 7, this was one of those things she really wanted to be different. It was objectionable to her. She didn't want to be this person in her relationship, in life. She knew it was causing Chris harm. She didn't want to, she didn't want to be that. She was really desperate to be different. She said the prayer. She was really inviting God in. And one day her and Chris are driving through town. They get to a stop sign. Somebody crosses the road in front, and it's this pretty woman. And, he's looking straight ahead, and Jody thinks, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. And then she says something, and the same thing that's always happened. She accuses him of looking at this woman and, thinking she's attractive, and Chris is defensive and pissed and feels attacked, and they're fighting. And, Jody calls me crying and says, this doesn't work. The steps are, BS. Like, I'm the same person I've always been, what's the point? What's the point? And again, it's that painful place of 6 and 7 where we see the truth of our actions. We're not delusional anymore. And yet we don't yet have access to a power. But God also isn't going to do for us what we can do for ourselves. And I found that in 6 and 7 often. God's not going to do for me what I can do for myself. But in that moment, as her sponsor on the other end of that phone, I understood 6 and 7. And I said, oh my God, Jody, did you hear what you said? You said, I had the thought, don't say anything. Don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. And then you said something, but that was God. That was God absolutely coming in that moment, giving you the opportunity to turn towards him, turn towards a new way of being, or to turn back into your old way. God's not going to make you somebody else, but he's going to give you the choice. You had that moment of pause, and you had the ability to do something different or to not, and that's okay. But that is what 6 and 7 is. There's been some things that have been taken, but more often than not, what I've been given is that moment of clarity to see the truth of my actions and to have the opportunity to turn towards something different or to do what I've always done, and that's pretty amazing, because I never, Jody never had that moment before. I never had that choice before. I now, have that voice. And, I had an email recently that I was writing to my ex-husband, and I had that voice saying, don't hit send, don't hit send, don't do it, don't do it. I hit send. I did. And I thought, I know that I'm doing the wrong thing, but I don't care. It feels good right now. But, I had, it was my choice, or God gave me the opportunity to choose to do something different and to, not create harm. I did end up having to go back and apologize for that. But God does not make me into somebody that I don't want to be. I still have the ability to cause all the harm I want to cause, but now I have the choice to either, access power or to align my will with God's will. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, but that was like a crazy epiphany and mind blowing. And I'm so glad you gave that example out. Because for so long I've had recently discovering the God awareness thing, being well, how do you explain it, or what is it? And I think you just put it into perfect words right there, of just having that aha moment of yes, every time I hear that voice, I now recognize it, now being recovered, but I never put 2 and 2 together that me ignoring it was God offering a choice and me going back to my own will. So that's really cool that you painted that picture. Thank you.
Absolutely. Meredith, you look like you're having an experience there. Do you want to say anything?
Hi.
Hello.
I totally connected with that. I have a lot of those right now, and I never thought of it that way. But it is a God moment or a God shot, some people say.
So
Well, it made me think, and this kind of goes back to the question that you asked earlier, Steph. If I'm not doing 10 steps and 11 steps, then I'm not having that 5th step experience each day. And that's what I need, right? Like I can't do, like I'm not going, like I don't do a 5th step every day. I don't. But what I have is, those mini 5th steps, which is 10 and which is my nightlies, where hopefully if I'm doing it right, I'm having those mini surrenders where those defects are objectionable, because like you said, if it's not objectionable, the needed power isn't going to be like, I'm not going to surrender it and access that power, which is what's needed. More and more delusional, and we have blind spots. We just do. It's sort of like the rats in the cellar. It's like, we don't know what's there if we don't know. And I had this experience, and this was, when I was moving to Texas. So like 8 years ago. My mom is, as moms and daughters, they're complicated relationships. My mom's been, a big part of my story, good and bad in many ways. And she loves me so much. I know she does. And that love can sometimes be messy and overwhelming. And, she's an active addict and alcoholic and all of the things that go with that. And so when I was leaving Maine, I knew, I didn't want to tell her that we were moving because I knew that it was going to be a thing. And I hate things. I hate conflict. I hate you being upset with me. I hate, messy, big feelings that are not my own. Like my own, I can kind of get down with, but your messy, big feelings, I don't want, take it away. And my mom has big, messy feelings. And I knew that me and her grandchildren moving out of Maine and all the way to Texas was going to create a lot of her big feelings. And I didn't want to deal with it. And again, these are blind spots. So none of me was coming into this with awareness. In my mind, it all made perfect sense. I was delusional. And so here's how my conversation with my mom went. Hey mom, so, Brian got this job in Texas and, I think that we're, going to have to move to Austin, and then she started spiraling and crying and I started panicking. And so the next thing I said was, no, we're going to buy a house that's big enough and you'll have your own room and you can move with us. And in my head, I hear myself saying this, but my next thought is there's no way she's going to move. She's not going to come to Texas. She doesn't even show up for Thanksgiving. She can't get her life together to drive 20 minutes. There's no way she's going to pack up everything and come to Texas. So in my mind, this was okay, this little lie, this, manipulation, but then it starts going on. So then we start actually looking for a house that has a room for her. But in the back of my head, I keep, and my husband, he's now my ex-husband, but my husband at the time started getting nervous because my mom's a hot mess, right? Just think, active addict, alcoholic. And he's saying Chloe, I think she's actually going to move with us. And I'm saying, no, don't, she's definitely not. Just think about it. She's going to bail at the last minute. Just hang in there. But we want a house with an extra room in case somebody wants to come and visit, right? Anyway, to jump to the end, she moved with us. And, just as awful as you can probably imagine it might have been, it was that bad. My kids were having nightmares about, their grandmother burning the house down. We were having to spot her on the stairs because she was going to fall. She was, it was a mess. My kids had never experienced active addiction or alcoholism with their dad or me. And yet I brought that into their childhood because of my defects of character, because I don't like conflict, because the bottom line is I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to be uncomfortable, and I will lie. I will manipulate. I will move you into my house to avoid a hard conversation. And in the end, it was awful for everybody. And I had to put her on a plane and send her back to Maine. And, I caused harm to my then husband, to my children, to her, to my sister, all because, again, so these defects of character, it's not just I'm a little bit of a jerk and I might flip you off in traffic. I will move you into my house. And then I will hate you for it. And I will think that it's your fault, even though I know exactly who you are ahead of time. I'm pissed that you're not different. And I think that if I intervene on you, if I send you to treatment, if I cry, if I use frothy emotional appeal, that maybe you'll show up differently, and then I resent you because you don't, and then everybody's mad at me because I've done it. I'm going, why are you mad at me? I'm not the addict. I'm not the one that's falling down the stairs. And so when I saw the truth of that, I was a lot of years sober. And it was a blind spot. I was, I wasn't doing nightlies. I wasn't 10-stepping. I was running on self-will, just trying to arrange the lights, the scenery. And all of those steps leading up to this, they're all relevant all the time. We don't just do a third step and then move on. It is all relevant because I still show up as that actor that's playing the director, that's convinced that if you would just stay put, if you would just say these lines, if you would just wave your hand this way when I point at you, then I'll be happy and you will too. And it still shows up in my life, but if I'm doing 10 and 11, hopefully I have, people with spiritual consent that are able to point out those blind spots when I can't see them myself, full of ego and I want what I want. And so for me, it's just being like, it's Mark, the speaker that's not with us anymore named Mark used to talk about, I am asleep dreaming I'm awake, and I'm going through life sound asleep. And the problem with it is I don't even know I'm asleep until I wake up. And then I look back, and that's how it is, right? When I'm dreaming, I don't know I'm dreaming. I don't know that I'm dreaming until I'm awake and I look back. I'm operating through life spiritually asleep, and I'm stepping on you, and and these defects are ruling my life. And I rely on being spiritually awakened and staying spiritually awake in order to see that. And some of it's just that, some of it's just spiritual development. Some of it's, again, that we can't see it until we, have certain experiences, till we surrender certain pieces of ourselves. Some of it we're just not going to see until we get put in a position where our eyes are opened. And I think it's just being like our defects. It's really 4 and 5 are really so good for that. That's where we're really pulling it apart and seeing with clarity. But again, I'm still sometimes surprised, like I said, about my level of insecurity. I had no idea until I was put into a position where it was really brought to the forefront, and until I was in a position to see it. Anyone else? I did not think I was going to be able to talk for an hour about 6 and 7.
It was perfect timing too. It was so great. Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.